Well, lots of news around today. Joining me is the panel, Sky News contributor and host of the Spectator Australia's Australiana Podcast, Will Kingston, and the Courier Mail's night editor, Damien Tomlinson. Great to have you guys on board. Now, Anthony Albanese is halfway through his term, and already it feels too long. But get this, Albo announced today that he wants his terms to be extended from 3 years to 4. Have a listen.
Our view, long-term policy, and we've put it to the Australian people, is for 4-year terms. But I don't anticipate that happening anytime soon, and I think that's unfortunate. Every single state has 4 years.
Will, apart from Albo, do you reckon anyone else in the country reckons we need even more Albo?
James, Albo is absolutely right on this. We are, you've got to keep in mind that this will apply just as much to the guy you like as the guy you don't like. We are crippled by short-termism in this country. Look at the cycle of a first-term government. You have the first year honeymoon where they're finding their feet. You have the second year to do something, and then you're in election campaign mode for the third year. Now, Albo buggered that up with the Voice, admittedly, but 1 year out of 3 to get stuff done when this country needs such serious reform is woefully inadequate. We're continuously looking at polls as politicians. They're continuously looking at the election cycle. This may be one way to try and get serious reform back on the agenda in Australia, because at the moment, it's just not there.
Will, I know you make sense, but I am not going to agree with you until maybe we've got someone in the lodge other than Albo. Damien, talk some common sense to us. We can't have 4-year terms while this Labor government is in power, can we?
Will make some great points there, James, but I have to side with you there. I couldn't bear the thought of a 4-year term of a federal government of any particular stripe, to be honest. We have them up here in our state level politics, and it just seems like it takes forever to get back to the ballot box. And at a federal level, I think 3 years is quite long enough.
Amen. I'm with you on that. Will ignore everything you said, and we'll talk about it when there's a different Prime Minister. The Supreme Court of Western Australia has ruled a 62-year-old woman can have sperm removed from her deceased husband. Now, the couple tragically lost 2 children in accidents and were discussing having another via an overseas surrogate, but then the husband died suddenly before Christmas. Now, posthumous fertilisation is illegal in WA, so another court order would be required before the woman could use the sperm. But, Will, this raises a lot of ethical questions, doesn't it?
It does. In this instance, I'm okay with it because they could establish that the intent of the husband was to go ahead with it. But what I would say, it does indicate a worrying trend against protecting bodily autonomy in our court system. We've already seen over the COVID period that the courts didn't step in to protect bodily autonomy when coercive vaccine mandates were put in place. I can't believe that there are still jobs in this country where you need to have an experimental vaccine in your system to take that job. This is another example, albeit a limited one, where the court hasn't protected bodily autonomy. And I just wonder if the abortion debate was to rear its ugly head in Australia, whether the courts would stand up for the bodily autonomy of women in the way that perhaps they should. Just a thought.
All right, let me go to this story from Canberra. The Australian newspaper has revealed more than 10% of submissions to a Senate inquiry into legalising cannabis were likely written by people using AI. Now, I suppose on one level this is kind of encouraging. It means ChatGPT works even when you're stoned. But is it a problem, Damien, when people start using chatbots to generate submissions on important issues to the Senate?
I think it's a massive problem because, you have these unfairly overblown, unrepresentative social media swarms that sort of pretend to be much bigger than they are. And with the power of AI, you can suddenly generate hundreds of submissions for any given cause and push an argument and pretend that there's massive support. So, look, I'm glad they work when you're otherwise a little bit inhibited, but it is a slippery slope.
Will, what Damien said is exactly what happened. I assume the Greens, I know the Greens called for lots of submissions. They said, let's flood this inquiry with submissions in support. And ChatGPT just makes it too easy, doesn't it? I mean, you take 30 seconds and it looks like you've spent hours on it.
Yeah, this is a blessing for the Greens. The ChatGPT will be writing the entire Greens policy platform before long. Damien is right in that I think it can create this volume of responses. But I think there's also an opportunity for good writers to be able to be more persuasive. You can see that ChatGPT does create some pretty mediocre, run-of-the-mill types of arguments in the way that it produces content. So I think that you'll get a lot of very average responses. But I think that also creates opportunities for people who are persuasive, who are strong with argumentation, to actually stand out from that dirge and make a case that is authentic.
All right, a lot of people are still on holidays, so let's talk about holidays, especially holidays for our premiers and our Prime Minister. Queensland Premier Stephen Miles is under fire for taking a Christmas holiday while the Gold Coast was being inundated by floods, which kind of reminds me of when Scott Morrison got in all sorts of trouble for being overseas while bushfires raged. Remember this?
They know that, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room. That's the brave people who do that are doing that job.
Well, Stephen Miles cut short his holiday to front a press conference with Gold Coast Mayor Tom Tate yesterday. Damien, is it just too dangerous for premiers and PMs to go away during Christmas these days?
Look, I think, being a North Queenslanders as we are, James, we probably would prefer to see less of politicians during natural disasters. But the standard has been set by the left and the Labor government in opposition, unfortunately. ScoMo's sort of stumbling answer to that question about holding a hose sadly has set the standard. And now, unfortunately, yes, politicians are judged by where they turn up and when. And especially during this most recent crisis in far north Queensland, Albo took several days before he landed up there. So Miles, as unfair as it is, and I think they're all entitled to holidays, has to now conform to that standard which his own side has set.
Pope Francis has used an end-of-year speech to talk about Nigerian Christians killed at Christmas. Have a listen and see if you can work out how these Christians died.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, purtroppo la celebrazione del Natale in Nigeria è stata segnata da gravi violenze nello stato di Plateau, con molte vittime. Prego per loro e le loro famiglie, che Dio liberi la Nigeria da questi orrori.
Violence with many victims. Okay, was there a fight over a car park? Did a Christmas party get out of hand? What the Pope meant to say was that 140 Nigerian Christians were murdered by Islamic jihadis. He might have added that, according to Nigerian human rights watchdog Intersociety, 52,000 Christians have been butchered or hacked to death for being Christians in Nigeria since 2009. So if people want to talk about a genocide, why do leaders seem so reluctant to call out Islamic extremists?
Cowardice, James. Cowardice. And it's cowardice in two forms. It's cowardice in response to the threat of physical harm. We saw tragically last year that Salman Rushdie finally met with that harm after spending his life, or the last 20 years of his life, under that threat. But it's also cowardice for being afraid to be called a racist. Now, we need to separate, in Australia and abroad, legitimate discussions about culture and religion with racism. It is not racist to call out many of the problems that surround the Islamic religion and Islamic culture. We need to be brave to have those open conversations. Unfortunately, too many people will say that you are a racist if you have that conversation. That's wrong, and leaders need to have more courage to stand up against that mentality.
Yeah, when even the Pope won't stand up for Christians, that's a problem. Let me finish with this and get a quick thought from both of you. The initial copyright on Disney's iconic Mickey Mouse has expired. The 1928 depiction of the character in Steamboat Willie has entered the public domain 95 years after it was released. So what do you reckon movie makers have done? They've rushed to the cinemas to release a Mickey Mouse horror movie. Have a look.
Where the hell did he go?
Damien, would you see a Mickey Mouse slasher movie, or do you think it looks a bit goofy?
Definitely looks goofy, as a lot of these sort of slasher horror movies do. But look, it's a credit to the marketing team at that movie studio that they knew the deadline was passing and they were able to get this movie out right on the day. So good on them.
Will, just a quick thought from you. Would you see that movie, or would you prefer Barbie?
I prefer neither. I'll be interested to see whether they have followed what South Park said is Disney's new strategy for casting, which is put a chick in it, make her lame, and make her gay. I'm not sure how that fits in with the slasher context, but we will see.
You know they'll find a way. Will Kingston, Damien Tomlinson, thanks so much for your time.